Hello, my name is Daisy Gonzalez, and I'm a fourth year undergraduate student at the University of California, Riverside, where I study education and public policy. I had the opportunity to intern as an immigration writer with Latino Republic for the past year. And as an immigration writer, I interviewed, researched, and reported stories that focused on both the immigrant and Latino experience in the United States. Specifically, I focused on the experiences of Latino students as well as immigrant and undocumented students in the educational system in the US. And as someone that has gone through the system as a first-gen Mexican-American student, I experienced various challenges and obstacles that were imposed on me at such an early age. And this really piqued my interest to learn more about education and education reform, and what that really means for specifically undocumented students and immigrant students who may not fully understand the complexities of their legality or what being documented means, or even navigating, the K through 12 education system. So I also focused on educational policies that were passed that hindered these students' ability to navigate educational systems, as well as the student response to these policies. Oftentimes, I think these stories are underrepresented and marginalized. So I thought this was a unique opportunity for me to highlight the challenges as well as the student contributions. Because when we talk about educational policy and education reform, we tend to forget, undocumented students and the additional assistance they need to achieve academic success. So I had an opportunity as an immigration writer to bring these stories and these voices into light. My first story that I published with Latino Republic focused on how COVID-19 has impacted English learner and immigrant students specifically, and how essential it was for school districts to support these students. In this story, I discovered after researching that a lot of these educational disparities have long existed before the pandemic and how these were only heightened. So for example, navigating technology at home, having language barriers, having lack of academic support, or limited access to resources. And all of this truly created an environment where students started to become left behind during the pandemic and not prioritized in their school districts. So given these challenges, I wanted to research some of the ways we can remedy these obstacles, and part of it was establishing partnerships with community-based organizations. So I had an opportunity to interview ImSchools, which is an immigrant-led nonprofit org that partners with K through 12 schools. And I also interviewed Californians Together, a statewide advocacy coalition of powerful organizations that dedicated to improving California schools and promoting equitable educational resources. So it was truly rewarding to hear the different strategies that these orgs were doing to help students, such as, adopting culturally responsive lesson plans, listening to their students, providing trainings for teachers, and even adding a familial key part to it, which was during this pandemic, translating CDC information, giving parents testing locations, providing assistance to accessing technology. And so it really centered on, not only how we can support these students, but also how we can support their parents during this critical time. And so my story really focused on how schools can center themselves within their communities. My second story that I published talked about ethnic studies and how specifically a law that banned ethnic studies led to a national uprising. So in the story, I focused on the Mexican American Studies program that was designed in Tucson, Arizona in the late 90s, and how it was banned through a law called HB 2281. So I was very interested in this law, and I was curious to see, what were its immediate effects for Latino communities and Latino students, as well as its long-term effects and the consequences of implementing these types of laws in other states. I was also really curious to find out about the student resistance piece to it and the student youth activism that took place in response to this ban. And so for this story, I had an opportunity to interview an organization in Arizona called CHITO, which stands for the Chicano Institute of Teaching and Organizing. And it's an education consulting collective where they teach and instruct other teachers and school staff on how they can develop an ethnic studies curriculum in their own classrooms. So after interviewing the director of CHITO, Anita Fernandez, she provided me an insightful perspective on the consequences of the banning in Arizona and how this created a hostile environment but also, a critical understanding of how we can move forward from this and start to rebuild educational spaces that truly center the experiences and knowledges of students of color. So I really took this story and I tried to develop it as a way to show how this growing movement of ethnic study is still not over, and there are definitely long ways to go. My third piece focused on more of a community engagement analysis. So it focused on community health workers, also known as promotoras, and their role during the pandemic. So after researching, I discovered that these community health workers were assisting and checking on some of the most underserved communities that were being hit the hardest during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was really rewarding to see how these promotoras and how this specific model has substantially helped to create a more welcoming community, especially under this period of isolation. My final and current piece with Latina Republic is an interview piece. It's a testimonial piece that where I was able to interview an alumni of Dartmouth College, and some of the student action, student resistance that took place in Dartmouth College in trying to, change anti-immigrant sentiment in national documents. So that's the current project that I'm working on. Interning with Latina Republic not only gave me an opportunity to speak and sort of highlight the stories that I felt, were underrepresented, but it also provided me an opportunity to expand, my awareness on immigrant experiences in the United States. As someone who's lived in California for their entire lives, I think I've grown comfortable in the space that I'm in, and I've grown comfortable in my own little bubble. But being a Latina Republic truly showed me how important it is to expand our knowledge and expand our awareness on other things that are going on in other states and in other communities. Because these are stories that we don't really hear about, especially in California, such as a banning of ethnic studies, or, the immigrant experience in Texas or New York or even Oklahoma or, Kansas, in these smaller states. Another critical piece was it highlighted organizations and NGO leaders and some of the work that they've been doing for such a long time that, truly does go unnoticed. And so being able to help highlight these voices and again, burst that bubble of comfortableness to show, what, to be aware of what other things that are going on in our country. In addition, it provided really unique opportunities to research, how to do research analysis and how to conduct interviews in order to put together a piece that is both analytical but also captivating. So I highly encourage for anyone interested to reach out, read some of our stories, and be a part of this collaborative group that really shares the same goal and values of helping their communities and highlighting some important work, some marginalized experiences that truly does go unnoticed in the US.